before the envelope, before the parking lot, before everything changed, she almost didn't stop. That's what Cecily told herself later, lying awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling of a hotel room that cost more per night than most people made in a month. She almost kept walking. She almost let someone else deal with it. She almost let the world keep spinning the way it always had, indifferent, cold, tilted permanently toward the people who already had everything. But she stopped. And that's where the story really begins. It was a Tuesday in November, the kind of Tuesday that feels like it was designed specifically to wear people down. The sky over Mill Haven, Ohio had been the same flat gray since morning, the kind of gray that doesn't threaten rain so much as it threatens despair. The temperature had dropped 14 degrees since the weekend. People walked with their shoulders hunched, their eyes on the pavement, their mouths pressed into thin lines. Cecily Marsh had been driving since 5 in the morning. She'd left Pittsburgh before dawn, taken the Interstate West, and somewhere around the Mill Haven exit she'd realized she hadn't eaten anything since the night before. Not because she forgot, because there was too much in her head, and her body had stopped sending signals. That happened sometimes when things got complicated, and things had been very complicated for the past 6 weeks. She pulled into a gas station on Route 9, the kind with a small convenience store attached, the kind where the coffee had been sitting in the pot since opening, and the fluorescent lights made everyone look like they were already dead. She filled the tank, went inside, bought a granola bar and a cup of coffee that tasted like hot cardboard, and stood at the counter for a moment looking at nothing. The woman behind the register, young, maybe 22, with chipped nail polish and eyes that had already seen too much of the wrong kind of life, didn't look up from her phone. Cecily didn't mind. She was wearing what she always wore when she traveled alone: dark jeans, a plain gray fleece zip-up, running shoes she'd had for 3 years. No jewelry except the thin wedding band she never took off, which was simple enough that most people assumed it was cheap. Her hair was pulled back in a low ponytail. She had no makeup on. She carried a canvas tote bag from a museum gift shop, the kind that cost $12. Nobody looked at her twice. That was in many ways the point. She was walking back to her car when she saw it, half tucked under the front tire of a silver pickup truck 2 spaces over. A manila envelope, the standard legal size, sealed and slightly crumpled at one corner as if it had been stepped on. It was fat with papers. The back of it had writing in blue pen, but from where Cecily stood she couldn't make out the words. She stopped. For a moment she just stood there with her granola bar in one hand and her terrible coffee in the other, looking at the envelope and doing the math that anyone does in that situation. Someone else will find it. The truck owner will notice. It probably fell out of the recycling. But the lot was nearly empty, and the envelope was directly under the front tire. When the truck pulled out, and there was no telling when that would be, the envelope would either stay pinned to the asphalt or get dragged and shredded beneath the wheel. She walked over and picked it up. On the back in neat block letters, Harlan Memorial, Patient Aldridge, do not delay. Cecily turned it over. The front had an address, a law office, Trescott and Vale, on Meridian Street downtown, and a return address from Harlan Memorial Hospital. In the upper right corner, someone had written in red ink, "Time sensitive, power of attorney docs." She stood very still. A power of attorney, time sensitive, from a hospital. There was a woman named June Aldridge somewhere in that hospital, and these were the papers that decide what happened to her if she couldn't decide for herself. And they were sitting in a gas station parking lot in Mill Haven, Ohio, half under a stranger's tire. Cecily looked at the truck. No one in it. She looked at the convenience store. No one watching. She looked at the envelope in her hand. She thought about her mother, the way her mother had looked in a hospital bed 7 years ago, in a room in a hospital not so different from Harlan Memorial, waiting for paperwork that was late, waiting for someone to come, waiting for the world to care whether she had any say in what happened to her own body. The coffee was going cold. Cecily put it on the roof of the truck, finished the granola bar in 2 bites, and got back in her car. She typed Trescott and Vale into her GPS. The law office was 11 minutes away, on a street that ran through what passed for downtown Mill Haven, a row of brick buildings, a coffee shop with a hand-lettered sign, a bank, a hardware store, the kind of street that had been somebody's pride and joy at some point and was now just holding on. Trescott and Vale occupied the second floor of a narrow building between a tax preparation office and what used to be a shoe store. There was a door at street level and a buzzer. Cecily pressed the buzzer. Nothing happened for a long moment. Then the door clicked open. The stairwell smelled like old carpet and lemon cleaner. Upstairs, the reception area was small and cluttered. Stacks of folders on the desk, a dying plant on the windowsill, a young man at the front desk, who looked up from his computer with the expression of someone who had been interrupted mid-task and was not entirely pleased about it. He looked at Cecily. He took in the fleece, the canvas bag, the running shoes. His expression didn't change exactly, but something in it shifted, a small recalibration. "Can I help you? I found this in the parking lot over on Route 9. Cecily set the envelope on his desk. The gas station near the Millhaven exit. It was under someone's tire. The man looked at the envelope. His face went pale. He stood up. That's the Aldridge file. We've been, he stopped himself, picked up the envelope, turned it over, checked the seal. How did you? This was supposed to be delivered this morning. We have a courier service and He shook his head. I'm sorry, where exactly did you find it? Cecily told him. She described the truck, the location, how it had been positioned under the tire. The young man, his nameplate said Dirk, associate, was already picking up his phone. I need to call Mr. Trescott and the hospital. He looked up at Cecily with something that had shifted from irritation to urgency. Are you? Can you wait? Just a few minutes? He's going to want to speak with you. I have time. She sat in one of the waiting room chairs and looked at her own hands while Derek made his calls in a hushed, rapid voice behind the glass partition. She could hear fragments. Found it in a parking lot. Just walked in off the street. Yes, I know, I'll tell him. The plant on the windowsill was a peace lily. It was yellowing at the edges. It needed water and more light, and whoever was supposed to be taking care of it had let it go too long. Cecily knew that feeling. After about 4 minutes, a door at the back opened and a man came out. Mid-60s, silver hair, the slightly rumpled look of someone who had been a sharp dresser 30 years ago and had never quite updated the wardrobe. He was reading the envelope as he walked. He looked up at Cecily. You found this? It wasn't a question. Route 9 gas station. It was under a truck tire. He exhaled slowly. Do you understand what this is? Power of attorney documents. Patient named June Aldridge. Time sensitive. He looked at her more carefully now. Something in the way she'd said it, calm, specific, no drama, made him adjust his initial read of her. June Aldridge is 81 years old, he said. She had a stroke 4 days ago. Her family is in the process of a very difficult. He stopped. She's been waiting for these documents. Her daughter has been waiting. This was the only copy that was properly notarized. Cecily nodded. The courier apparently dropped his bag getting into his car. This envelope must... Vale shook his head. I don't know how it ended up all the way over on Route 9, but... He stopped again, looked at the envelope, then at Cecily. You could have left it there. Yes, most people would have, I know. He studied her for another moment. Then he extended his hand. Wallace Trescott, thank you. Genuinely. She shook it. Cecily Marsh. Something happened on his face when she said her name. A small, involuntary thing, like a gear catching. He looked at the fleece, at the canvas bag, at the thin wedding band on her left hand. Cecily Marsh, he repeated slowly. Yes. He was quiet for a moment. Then, forgive me, are you by any chance related to Douglas Marsh? The air in the room didn't change. The plant kept dying slowly on the windowsill. Derek behind the partition had gone very still. Cecily looked at Wallace Trescott with the same calm expression she'd worn the entire time. He's my husband, she said. Douglas Marsh was not the kind of name that meant anything to most people. He wasn't an entertainer, wasn't a politician, didn't appear on television or give speeches at stadiums. His name never trended anywhere. He didn't have a verified social media account. He was the kind of wealthy that doesn't need to perform itself. The kind that existed in the architecture of things, in the foundations of buildings and the fine print of acquisition agreements, in the rooms where decisions were made before anyone else in the world knew there was a decision to be made. He owned, among other things, the company that had acquired and was in the process of redeveloping a significant piece of commercial real estate in downtown Millhaven, which was why his wife had been driving in from Pittsburgh at 5 a.m, which was why she had stopped at that particular gas station on Route 9. Cecily had not told any of this to the man at the gas station counter, or to the couple she'd walked past on the sidewalk, or to Derek at the front desk who had looked at her canvas bag and recalibrated. She rarely did. Wallace Trescott sat down slowly in the chair across from her. "Your husband's company," he said, "is the reason this office has been keeping the hours it's been keeping for the past 3 months. I know the Aldridge family. June Aldridge's son, Philip. He's one of the property holders whose situation has been complicated by the acquisition negotiations." Cecily looked at him steadily. "I know that too, then you know." He stopped, recalibrated again. There was something about the way this woman sat, the way she held herself, that was making him understand he had been in the middle of a chess game he hadn't realized was being played. "May I ask what you're doing in Millhaven, Mrs. Marsh?" "I'm here to look at the situation myself," she said simply. "Douglas prefers data. I prefer to understand what the data is actually describing." Trescott was quiet. "The acquisition team has been presenting the property dispute as a holdout situation," Cecily continued. "One difficult seller, one emotional attachment to a family property, something to be resolved through sufficient financial pressure." She paused. "I wanted to understand whether that description was accurate. And?" She tilted her head slightly. "I stopped at that gas station because I needed coffee. I found your envelope. I'm telling you this so you understand that what happened this morning had nothing to do with any of the rest of it. But now I know that June Aldridge is in Harlan Memorial with a stroke, waiting for power of attorney documents that were lost in a parking lot, and her son has been in a property dispute with my husband's acquisition team for 18 months, and the stress of that dispute." She stopped herself, looked at the envelope in his hand. "I'd like to understand the Aldridge situation better. Not as a negotiation, as a situation." Wallace Trescott looked at her for a long time, then he stood up. "I can do that," he said quietly. She spent the rest of the morning in a conference room on the second floor of Trescott and Vale, with folders spread across the table, and a second cup of coffee that was marginally better than the first one. The Aldridge situation was not what the acquisition team had described. Philip Aldridge was 53 years old. He had grown up in his grandmother's house on Connolly Street, which his mother June had inherited, and which now sat in the middle of a block the development company wanted to reimagine as a mixed-use commercial space. He had never been a difficult seller. He had been willing to negotiate from the very beginning. But 18 months ago, a junior member of the acquisition team, 27 years old, eager, certain of his own cleverness, had sent a letter to Philip that was technically legal and practically cruel. It had implied, without quite saying, that if Philip did not accept the current offer, the company had other means of ensuring the property was no longer desirable to hold. Philip had stopped returning calls after that. His mother had moved in with him to help with his son while the dispute dragged on. 3 weeks ago, she'd started having headaches. 2 weeks ago, she'd gone to the emergency room. 4 days ago, she'd had the stroke. Cecily read all of this in a conference room, in a building on Meridian Street, in a city she hadn't planned to spend more than 20 minutes in, while a peace lily died slowly 1 floor below her. She didn't read it like someone encountering new information. She read it like someone confirming what she had already suspected. At 12:30, she asked Derek to call her a car. Then she asked him if he could let her know when the documents were delivered to the hospital. "Of course," he said. He hesitated. "Mrs. Marsh, for what it's worth, June Aldridge's daughter has been beside herself. This morning, when they realized the documents were missing," he stopped. "She'll want to know someone found them. You can tell her someone found them," Cecily said. "You don't need to tell her anything else." He nodded slowly. She picked up her canvas bag. "One more thing," she said, turning back. "The junior associate who sent the letter to Philip Aldridge 18 months ago. Do you have his name in any of those files?" Derek looked at his desk, at the folders, at the question he hadn't been expecting. Yes, I think so. Don't worry about it," Cecily said. "I'll find it." The car took her to Harlan Memorial. She hadn't planned to go there. She sat in the back seat watching Millhaven scroll past. The hardware store, the parking lots, the blocks of houses going slightly gray at the edges, and she thought about her mother, about a hospital room in Pittsburgh 7 years ago, about the particular helplessness of sitting beside someone you loved and knowing that the papers that were supposed to protect them were somewhere in a system that was too large and too indifferent to care about one person's name. She didn't go into the hospital. She sat in the car in the parking lot for a few minutes. She watched a woman come out of the main entrance, 50s, dark coat, walking with the particular exhaustion of someone who had been inside too long, and get into a car 3 spaces over. She thought about June Aldridge in a room somewhere in that building, waiting. She thought about Philip Aldridge, who had stopped returning calls 18 months ago because someone had decided that leverage was a strategy. She thought about her husband's acquisition team and the story they had been telling, and the story she had spent the morning learning, and the distance between those two stories. Then she took out her phone and called Douglas. He picked up on the second ring, the way he always did when she called. "How's Millhaven?" "Interesting," she said. A pause. Douglas Marsh was 61 years old, and he had built something very large from something very small, and he had done it by being exceptionally good at understanding, from the sound of one word, what that word actually meant. "How interesting. I need you to pull someone from the acquisition team," she said. "Junior associate. He sent a threatening letter to a property holder about 18 months ago. I'll get you the name." Silence. "And the property holder? I want to start over with him," Cecily said. "Actual negotiation, not pressure. There's a fair deal here. It just requires someone who's willing to look for it. We're 6 months into the timeline, Cecily." "I know. The board. Douglas." She said his name once clearly, the way she did when she was done with the preliminary conversation and had arrived at the thing she actually meant. "I found a woman's power of attorney documents in a gas station parking lot this morning. They were under a truck tire. The woman is in that hospital." She looked at the building. "She's 81 years old. She had a stroke. Her son stopped trusting us because someone on our team decided to be clever instead of fair. And our acquisition timeline is the background noise of the worst 18 months of that family's life." She stopped. Douglas was quiet for a long time. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay, I'll handle the associate, and I'll call Simpson about restarting the Aldridge negotiation." A pause. "You want to be in the room?" "No, I want it to happen because it's right, not because I watched." Another silence. Then, quietly, "You didn't have to go to Millhaven yourself, you know. You could have sent anyone." "I know. But you wanted to see it." "I needed to understand what the data was describing." She looked away from the hospital. At the gray sky, at the parking lot where ordinary people came and went with their ordinary troubles and their ordinary lives and their complicated grief. "There's a difference." He made a sound that was almost a laugh. "Come home when you're done." "I will." She put the phone in her pocket and sat for another moment. Before she left Millhaven, she went back to Trescott and Vale. She asked Derek for the dying plant on the windowsill. He blinked. The peace lily? Does anyone water it?" He looked at it. "I meant to, I keep forgetting. Can I take it?" He blinked again. "I mean, yes." "Sure, of course." She carried it downstairs in her canvas bag, its leaves drooping over the edge, its roots dry in the pot. She put it in the back seat of the car. At the hotel, she watered it in the bathroom sink and set it on the windowsill where the afternoon light came through. By morning, 2 of the leaves had lifted. 3 weeks later, Philip Aldridge signed an agreement with Marsh Development. It was not the original offer. It was substantially better, structured in a way that allowed him to retain a portion of the property in a form he could pass to his son, with a fair market buyout for the remainder and no timeline pressure. He never knew who had insisted on the renegotiation. The name on the paperwork was the company's. The voice on the phone was the new lead negotiator's. The deal was real. He told his mother about it in her hospital room, 2 days after she was transferred from intensive care to a standard room, on a morning when the sun actually came through the windows. June Aldridge listened to all of it, and then she asked one question. "Was someone looking out for us?" Philip didn't know how to answer that. He said, "I think someone was." She closed her eyes and was quiet for a while. Then she said, "Good. I always believed that. I always believed that someone would be." Cecily drove back to Pittsburgh on a Wednesday. The sky was still gray, but a different gray, lighter, the kind that sometimes break open by afternoon. She had the peace lily in the back seat, its leaves slowly returning to upright. She had a coffee that was, for once, genuinely good, from a place on Meridian Street she'd found on her second morning. She drove past the gas station on Route 9. She didn't stop. There was nothing to stop for anymore. The envelope was delivered. The documents were signed. The woman in the hospital had gotten what she was owed. The son had gotten a fair deal. The associate who had sent the cruel letter was, as of that morning, no longer on the acquisition team. She didn't stop, but she looked, just for a second. She looked at the parking lot where 2 weeks ago she had seen something under a tire and done the math and decided that someone should care. She looked at the unremarkable asphalt and the fluorescent lights visible through the glass of the convenience store and the ordinary, unseeing world going about its morning, and she thought, this is how it works. Not through gestures that announce themselves, not through moments that know their moments, just through someone, somewhere, deciding to stop, deciding that it's not their problem, and then deciding that it is. If this story moved you even a little, if you've ever been the person who stopped, or the person who needed someone to stop, let us know in the comments below. Tell us about a time someone showed up for you when they didn't have to, or a time you showed up for someone else. Those stories deserve to be heard. If you believe that kindness is never wasted, that the things we do when no one is watching are the things that matter most, share this with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you're new here, welcome to Velvet Verdict. We tell the stories that remind you what people are actually capable of. Hit subscribe. Come back tomorrow. We'll have another one waiting for you.